Good morning. This is Ron. It is Monday, March the 19th. Welcome to Story Time. And today is part two of chapter 11, titled An Untitled Letter from 1973 from Ayn Rand's book, Philosophy Who Needs It. In part one, Ayn Rand was talking about that she called this an untitled letter because her original idea was to call it "I Told You So," but figured that that was in dubious taste, and so she decided to go with no title at all. And so far, what we've got going is there's Dr. Tinberger from the Netherlands who was going ahead and proposing that a tax be put on people of ability. People that are of above average intelligence and ability should pay a special tax. And she's saying this is evidence of what she describes as the hatred of the good for being the good. And now part two. Mr. Worthstone has a solution to offer to the right, and here comes the full flowering of altruism's essence and purpose, spreading out its petals like a hideous jungle plant, the kind that traps insects and eats them. The purpose is not to burn sacrificial victims, but to have them leap into the furnaces of their own free will. Quote, what will be required of the new meritocracy is a formidably revived and reanimated spirit of noblesse oblige, rooted in the recognition and that they are immensely privileged and must, as a class, behave accordingly, being prepared to pay a far higher social price in terms of taxation, in terms of service, for the privilege of exercising their talents, unquote. Who granted them, quote, the privilege of exercising their talents, unquote? Those who have no talent. To whom must they pay, quote, pay a higher social price, unquote? To those who have no social value to offer. Who will impose taxation on their productive work? Those who have produced nothing. Whom do they have to serve? Those who would be unable to survive without them. Quote, did you want to know who is John Galt? I am the first man of ability who refused to regard it as guilt. I am the first man who would not do penance for my virtues or let them be used as the tools of my destruction. I am the first man who would not suffer martyrdom at the hands of those who wished me to perish for the privilege of keeping them alive, unquote. Atlas shrugged. Quote, this, the social price, is not an easy idea for a meritocracy to accept, unquote, Mr. Worthstone concludes. Quote, they like to think that they deserve their privileges, having won them by their own efforts. But this is an illusion, or at any rate a half-truth. The other half of the truth is that they are terribly lucky, and if their luck is not to run out, they must be prepared to pay much more for their good fortune than they had hoped or even feared, unquote. I submit that any man who ascribes success to luck has never achieved anything and has no inkling of the relentless effort which achievement requires. I submit that a successful man who ascribes his own legitimate success in part to luck is either a modest, concrete, bound repressor who does not understand the issue, or an appeaser who tries to mollify the resentment of envious mediocrities. For the nature of such resentment, see my article, The Age of Envy, in The New Left, the Anti-Industrial Revolution. Envy is a widespread sentiment in Europe, not in America. Most Americans admire success. They know what it takes. They believe that one must pay for one's sins, not for one's virtues. And the monstrous notion of paying ransoms for good fortune would not occur to them, nor would they take it seriously. Resentment against meritocracy. Our last presidential election, the landslide against McGovern, was a spectacular demonstration of America's loyalty to achievement on any level and of resentment against those egalitarian intellectuals who are trying to smuggle this country into a new caste system proposed by their British mentors, a mediocrity. Politically, statism breeds a swarm of little Caesars who are motivated by power lust. Culturally, statism breeds still lower a species, a swarm of little Neros who sing odes to depravity while the lives of their forced audiences go up in smoke. I have said repeatedly that American intellectuals, with rare exceptions, are the slavish dependents and followers of Europe's intellectual trends. The notion of a cultural aristocracy established and financed by the government is so grotesque in this country that one wonders how an article such as Mr. Peregrine Worsthorne's got published here. Can you see any group or class in America posturing about in the quote spirit of noblesse oblige unquote? Can you see Americans bowing to, say, Sir Burris Frederick Skinner or Dame Jane Fonda, thanking them for their charitable contributions? Yet, this is the goal of Britain's little Neros and of their American followers. I refer you to the Ayn Rand letter of January 1st, 1973, quote, to dream the non-commercial dream, unquote, for a discussion of why such aristocrats would have a vested interest in altruism and why they would be eager to pay a social price, quote, for the privilege of exercising their talents, unquote. If by meritocracy Mr. Worsthorne means a government picked elite, for instance, the BBC, then it is true that such an elite owes its privileges to luck and pull more than to merit. If he means the men of ability who demonstrate their merit in the free marketplace of ideas or of material goods, then his notions are worse than false. Package dealing is essential to the selling of such notions. Mr. Worsthorne's technique consists of making no distinction between these two kinds of merit, which means in seeing no difference between Homer and Nero. An article such as Mr. Worsthorne's and various equivalents would not appear in a newspaper without some heavy academic philosophical base. Newspapers are not published by or for theoretical innovators. Journalists do not venture to propagate an outrageous theory unless they know they can refer to some reputable source able, they hope, to explain the inexplicable and defend the indefensible. An enormous amount of unconscionable nonsense comes out of the academic world each year. Most of it is stillborn. But when echoes of a specific work begin to spurt in the popular press, they acquire significance as an advance warning, as an indication of the fact that some groups has a particular interest in shooting these particular bubbles into the country's cultural arteries. In the case of the new egalitarianism, an academic source does not exist. It may not be the first book of that kind, but it is the one most noticeably touted at present. It is A Theory of Justice by John Rawls, professor of philosophy at Harvard University. The New York Times Book Review, December 3rd, 1972, lists it among 5 significant books of 1972 and explains, although it was published in 1971, it was not widely reviewed until 1972 because critics needed time to get a grip on its complexities. In fact, it may not be properly understood until it has been studied for years. The book review itself did not review it until July 16, 1972, at which time it published a front-page review written by Marshall Cohen, professor of philosophy at the City University of New York. The fact that the timing of that review coincided with the period of George McGovern's campaign may or may not be purely coincidental. Let me say that I have not read and do not intend to read that work. But since one cannot judge a book by its reviews, please regard the following discussion as the review of a review. Mr. Cohen's remarks deserve attention in their own right. According to the review, Rawls, quote, is not an equalitarian, for he allows that inequalities of wealth, power, and authority may be just. He argues, however, that these inequalities are just only when they can be reasonably be expected to work out to the advantage of those who are worst off. The expenses incurred by whom? In training a doctor, like the rewards that encourage better performance from an entrepreneur, are possible or permissible only if eliminating them or reducing them further would leave the worse off still. If, however, permitting such inequalities contributes to improving the health or raising the material standards of those who are least advantaged, the inequalities are justified. But they are justified only to that extent, never as rewards for merit, never as the just deserts of those who are born with greater natural advantages or into more favorable social circumstances. I assume that this is an accurate summary of Mr. Rawls's thesis. The book review's plug of December 3 offers corroboration. The talented or socially advantaged person hasn't earned anything. Those who have been favored by nature, whoever they are, he, Rawls writes, may gain from their good fortune only on terms that improve the situation of those who have lost out. It is parasites who are the moral justification for the existence of the producers, but the existence of the parasites is an end in itself. John Galt, analyzing altruism in Atlas Shrugged. Certain evils are protected by their own magnitude. There are people who, reading that question from Rawls, would not believe that it means what it says, but it does. It is not against social institutions that Mr. Rawls and Mr. Cohen rebels, but against the existence of human talent, not against political privileges, but against reality, not against governmental favors, but against nature, against, quote, those who have been favored by nature, unquote, as if such a term as favor were applicable here. Not against social injustice, but against metaphysical injustice, against the fact that some men are born with better brains and make better use of them than others are and do. The new theory of justice demands that men counteract the injustice of nature by instituting the most obscenely unthinkable injustice among men. Deprive, quote, those favored by nature, unquote, i.e., the talented, the intelligent, the creative, of the right to the rewards they produce, i.e., the right to life, and grant to the incompetent, the stupid, the slothful, a right to the effortless enjoyment of the rewards they could not produce, could not imagine, and would not know what to do with. Mr. Cohen would object to my formulation. It is important to understand, he writes, that according to Rawls, it is neither just nor unjust that men are born with differing natural abilities into different social positions. These are simply natural facts. True, but if so, what is the purpose of the next sentence? To be sure, no one deserves his greater natural capacity or merits a more favorable starting point in society. The natural and social lottery is arbitrary from a moral point of view, but it does not follow, as the equalitarian supposes, that we should eliminate those differences. There's another way to deal with them. As we have seen, they can be put to work for the benefit of all, and, in particular, for the benefit of those who are worst off. If a natural fact is neither just nor unjust, by what mental leap does it become a moral problem and an issue of justice? Why should those, quote, favored by nature, unquote, be made to atone for what is not an injustice and is not of their making? And that is that has been part 2 of an untitled letter, chapter 11 of Ayn Rand's book called Philosophy, Who Needs It? So let me see here. I had something up here in the front, closer to the front, that I wanted to comment on. Let me see where it is here. About a meritocracy. I think, first of all, I wanted to say on her point of the issues of luck. There's a lot that even goes to what's called the malevolent universe premise. Because if you have the reality is that it's a benevolent universe, success is to be expected. Okay, so that's how you explain when you look around and you see all these successful people and successful things going on. Why is that so? Because it's a benevolent universe and success is to be expected. Now, if you try to pretend that the universe is the opposite, that it is unknowable, it is scary, it is unpredictable, and it is malevolent, and failure is to be expected, then you have a problem, because now you have to explain all the success that you see all around you. How do you explain that? Well, what you do is you simply write it off to luck, to cheating, or a combination of the two. Okay. Once you've done that, now you set the stage for everything else. You set the stage for the idea of taxing people who are born smarter or more talented than other people. And it also sets you up for hating the rich and making sure that they, quote, pay their fair share, unquote, and stick it to the rich and on and on about the rich. Because if it were true about the malevolent universe premise, then you would have a reason to hate the rich because the rich got rich by cheating, getting lucky, or a combination of the two. That's also the reason that we have in our society a phrase called giving back. And so you hear a lot about that. So and so is giving back. Or a person may say to themselves, I am giving back. Well, you only have to give back. It's only, you give back something that you've borrowed, you give back something that you have stolen. Okay, those are the only two reasons to give back. And in the particular case, let's say of a successful athlete, they haven't borrowed or stolen anything. Just because they may have, and they can't even prove that these individuals are born with the talents that they possess. But even if they were, that doesn't guarantee, that in and of itself doesn't guarantee anything. You have to develop those talents. You also have to have the discipline to stay away from those things which will have a tendency to counteract your talents, such as drug abuse, criminal activity, out of wedlock, childbirths, and things of that nature. Those are all things that are going to take away from your time, your energy to develop your talents. So, but you'll also notice that they work this, the left works it into conversations because they will be with an athlete, and one of the questions that inevitably comes up is, do you feel lucky? And the athlete goes for it every single time. And not only athletes, but people that are conservative, Rush Limbaugh's and Sean Hannity's, and people of that nature also fall for it because they'll be asked the same question. Rush Limbaugh is fairly well-to-do. Sean Hannity's fairly well-to-do. I don't know what their net worth is, and I don't care. But they'll be asked the same question, and inevitably they'll say the same thing. Yes, I feel lucky. And that's why I give back. And all they are doing when they do that is supporting the left and the left's basic premises for why the left wants socialist paradise. Because figure it out. If the only way to succeed is to cheat and to get lucky or a combination of the two, and you look around and you see all the success, that means there's a whole lot of cheaters going on. A whole lot of cheating, a whole lot of getting lucky. Where's mine? How come I'm not getting any? And there's a reason to be outraged and a reason to demand that all of this stop. No more cheating, no more getting lucky. We're going to get rid of all of that, and we're going to get everybody back to equal. And so, the standard then becomes too that the homeless person becomes the standard by which the left judges people. Which is kind of ironic because homeless people are some of the most selfish people on the face of the earth. They're not social. You know, they may end up living in groups, but basically they live and operate by themselves. They're very selfish people. But anyways, the homeless person becomes the person for the left to lionize and insist that we emulate because they're supposed to be the epitome of, they're the only people that haven't cheated. They've got virtually nothing, so therefore they couldn't have cheated or gotten lucky at all. Or to the extent that they got lucky, they threw it away or negated it in some way, shape, or form. So that's the whole reason for the hatred of what she calls the good for being the good, But the hatred of what I say is the hatred of the rich. Whenever you're hearing people talking about sticking it to the rich and whatnot, and it's really funny on the left when you hear it from people like Nancy Pelosi. But because Nancy Pelosi's rich, hundreds of millions of dollars is my understanding of what her her and her husband's net worth are or is. And but of course, Nancy Pelosi would say that she's forced to do it. Determinism. We live in a capitalist society. Capitalism forces me to cheat. It forces the promotion of people who are more talented, and that's why I am trying to. That if we were in a socialist paradise, I wouldn't have limousines. I wouldn't have a big fancy house. I wouldn't have as much money as I do. I would have just as much as I needed to get by or to survive, and that's it. So that's the way that she would justify that. So let's see. Yeah, that pretty much covers it for right now. So tomorrow is going to be a Storytime Extra, and on Wednesday I will be returning to part 3 of Chapter 11, An Untitled Letter. And until then, thank you very much for joining me, and have a great day.